Hey guys, Aaron Cybertron Zeng here, and today I am bringing you another team analysis slash breakdown. This is of the Rain team that I featured on Road to Ranked, more specifically episodes 28 through 37, so if you have not seen those episodes and you want to see this team in action in actual VGC play, definitely go check it out. I'll link the Road to Ranked playlist in the description below. But of course, like I mentioned, I am trying to do one of these analyses slash breakdowns for each individual team that I create and personally build on Road to Ranked, so this is the third team that I crafted for Road to Ranked. The previous two are also uploaded. The first one was the Sand team, the second one was the Tailwind team with Charizard and Naganadel and Hydreigon. So this is the Rain team, you guys saw this, and yeah, I'm just going to dive right into it. Of course, these team analyses will break everything down about the team, give you all the spreads. You can try out the QR code and the paste for Showdown, all linked in the description below, and it should be a fun time. So hopefully you guys find it helpful. As always, if you enjoy, please share support by leaving a like, I'd really appreciate it. Anyway, just starting off, I always like to talk about the team building process. So for this team, I knew I wanted to try my own take on a Rain team, but I wanted to go for like heavy offense without Trick Room, just because I had seen a fair amount of like Trick Room Rain teams around, and I wanted to see if I could build like a super speedy variant. So I wanted a Rain team. I like Politoed a little bit more than Pelipper for VGC 18, just because Politoed does get access to a bunch of cool moves like Helping Hand, Perish Song, and Icy Wind. I feel like those just make it a really strong option, and it's also slightly bulkier, whereas Pelipper is super frail. So I started with Politoed, and I think the best Rain Sweeper, or I guess they're really a bunch, right? You could go with Ludicolo, you could go with something like Mega Swampert, or even something like Kingdra, but I like Ludicolo the most just because I think it's really strong with Waterium Z, and I think its typing is really good. Water Grass is just super strong in general, and you get a lot of nice coverage. Giga Drain as a means of damage output is nice, and you also get stab on that. So I started with Politoed and Ludicolo. Next, I was looking for a Mega Evolution, and I figured this would probably be a better team to throw Mega Metagross on, just because, of course, Rain complements it really well. Metagross being Steel type, Rain shutting down that Fire type weakness. So I did throw Mega Metagross on. After Mega Metagross, I wanted to increase its damage output, and so Tapu Lele was a pretty clear and obvious pick, just because of Psychic Terrain. So I threw Tapu Lele on. And now I have 4 Pokemon that, you know, don't really take ground type attacks too well. I mean, Ludicolo obviously does a little bit more than Metagross and Lele, but I still wanted something to check ground types just so people couldn't spam Earthquake. So I was looking at, you know, flying type Pokemon, Levitators. Zapdos seemed like a pretty clear pick to me, because of the synergy that it has with Tapu Lele, of course being able to take advantage of the Psychic Seed, getting a special defense boost, and of course also setting up Tailwind. I figured like my team is already pretty speedy, so if I get a Tailwind up, I'll guaranteed outspeed my opponents for at least a couple of turns. So that, you know, covered a bunch of things on my team, gave me a Tailwind option, also allowed me to outspeed things. With Heat Wave, I could also cover some Steel types that gave me more trouble, like Ferrothorn. And finally, you know, Landorus-T, pretty much the most common Pokemon in the format, but it made a lot of sense on this team specifically. Intimidator, Physical Sweeper, just because my team was relatively special up until this point with Poly, Ludi, Lele, and Zapdos. So, you know, Landorus really just a pretty clear pick. Great synergy with Zapdos, with Earthquake, and overall just a very strong option. So, as you can tell, this is pretty much how I ended up coming up with the team. Very hyper offensive, so I knew I wanted to build my sets around that. So, Politoed, the first Pokemon, the one that really Rain revolves around. I opted for a little bit more offensive of a variant. Typically, Politoeds like won't run too much special attack investment, and they'll split between defense and special defense. I went with max HP, and I almost pretty much went with max special attack. I actually forget the defensive benchmark that I had for the 36 defense EVs, but it was just a little bit of extra bulk. I think it was something with Mega Kangaskhan. Might have been so that my berry activates through something like a double edge, but I have to double check that. But point is, Politoed, really strong option, and it is just a great Rain user, but also a great support Pokemon. Scald is typically the best means of offense, just because, you know, 100% accurate. Politoed doesn't do as much damage, so you get to fish for burns every time you use it, and you don't have to risk missing. I ended up not going with Icy Wind or Ice Beam, because I felt like I had enough Ice-type attacks on my team already, or when I was steering it. So I ended up going with Perish Song and Helping Hand. Helping Hand you'll typically see on Politoed because it combos really nicely with, you know, the Rain Sweepers like Ludicolo, especially with the Waterium Z, which I thought was really big. A Rain boosted, Helping Hand boosted Waterium Z from Hydro Pump on Ludicolo just like can one-shot almost anything, so a really strong option. And I opted for Perish Song because I thought it was a really great win condition, and we saw that a lot on Road to Ranked, where I'd be able to just get a quick 2 knockouts and then end the game instantly with Perish Song. So because of the nature of this team, I felt like Perish Song made a lot of sense. It also gave me another out against bulkier Pokemon that I might struggle to get damage off against, like Cresselia and Aegislash. So I really liked having Perish Song, and I would not change this moveset personally. The extra special attack investment was also nice, just because I think I ended up doing a lot more damage than players would often expect. Protect, typical option you'll see on Politoed, no reason to drop that here. So ended up not going for alternatives like Icy Wind, Ice Beam, or even Rain Dance, and I really like the set. I think it fit this team really well. Of course, with the Wiki Berries, so most times, you know, Politoed can eat up a super effective attack like a Thunderbolt and heal all the way back with this berry. I think probably one of the better items, especially on a bulkier Pokemon like Politoed. Next Pokemon is Ludicolo. So with Ludicolo, we typically saw Assault Vest back in older days of VGC, but now with the Z moves, I thought that Waterium Z was really strong, especially when you're using Hydro Pump as your main water base. So I ended up going with a super offensive spread, and you might ask, like, why do you have so much speed investment? That's because Choice Scarf users can still give Ludicolo some trouble. I wanted to guaranteed outspeed max speed Jolly Landorus, and so you do need 220 speed EVs to outspeed. Obviously, you want as much special attack as you can because Ludicolo's base special attack, not exactly the highest, and of course just a little bit left over in HP. So really strong option, and the moveset, you know, pretty typical. I basically just didn't have Scald. I had Fake Out, Giga Drain, Ice Beam, and Hydro Pump. No Protect either. Of course, because I'm not Assault Vest, I do have the option of running Protect, but I thought Fake Out was just too important to give up. And with Ludicolo, you really want Water, Ice, and Grass coverage, so I opted for Hydro Pump just because it's that much stronger with the Waterium Z. So pretty straightforward, but really strong, and with the Waterium Z, you just have so much more pressure right from the beginning of the game, even if you don't even lead with that Politoed. I often would go with combinations like maybe Tapu Lele and Ludicolo just to potentially double up for a knockout. So pretty basic set, but one that was really strong. Next Pokemon was Mega Metagross. This is as simple as it gets. I ended up opting for just Jolly, max attack, max speed, so that way, you know, at worst I would speed tie with opposing Metagrosses, or I would just outspeed them consistently. Went with a moveset of Iron Head, Zen Headbutt, Stomping Tantrum, and Protect. I didn't feel like I needed Ice Punch because my matchup against, you know, Pokemon that I would use Ice Punch against, like Salamence and Landorus, were already pretty good to begin with because I have, you know, Poly, I have Ludi, I have Zapdos, so I didn't really need Ice Punch. I didn't really need a fighting type attack, nor did I need Bullet Punch, so the moveset was super straightforward. Stomping Tantrum just gave me another out against steel types like Aegislash, like opposing Metagrosses, even Heatran. Not that you would really bring Heatran too often in a ring matchup, but it was just nice, especially against opposing Mega Metagrosses, so I really liked having that. Wouldn't change anything about this set, and pretty typical Mega Metagross. Most Metagrosses you'll see are going to be like just Jolly, max attack, max speed to really take advantage of its nice base speed, outspeeding most of the common Pokemon in the format. If you go with Adamant, then you do give up a lot of the Pokemon you would normally outspeed, and a lot of those Pokemon are pretty common as well. Next Pokemon is the Choice Scarf Tapu Lele. So I opted for a Scarf variant because I already had the Z move on Ludicolo, and I figured there were a fair amount of games that I'd want to bring both Lele and Ludi. So I didn't want to go with the Z move. Wasn't the biggest fan of Life Orb, even though I have used that in the past. Specs is pretty strong, but I figured Scarf was actually really nice because that allowed for a lot of synergy. Specifically, Scarf Lele with Zapdos means that you put the pressure away from Zapdos and you get to get a big attack off, maybe sacrificing Lele for a Tailwind, but you get one strong attack and then a free switch in. Alternatively, you can lead with Tapu Lele and Metagross, sets up the Psychic Terrain, and then suddenly you'll have a Choice Scarf Lele and a Mega Metagross, which is one of the faster Pokemon in the metagame, just outspeeding most Pokemon that you'll face against. For the EV spread, I did put 140 speed, and I went with a Modest Nature. For those that wonder what 140 speed does, that puts you right under max speed Tapu Koko, so you still win the Ter-Rain war. In retrospect, I kind of forgot about Mega Gengar, which is pretty much around the same speed tier, so I think I probably would have just put more speed EVs to outspeed Mega Gengar, since that did cause me some problems when playing against it. So guaranteeing the outspeed against Mega Gengar would be really nice, especially because a lot of times players don't expect the Choice Scarf. So yeah, ultimately the underspeeding the Tapu Koko, like, that didn't end up really mattering too much. We actually saw that a little bit in VGC 17, but players that would do that often would have Koko on the same team. I didn't have a Koko, so I probably should have just opted for a little bit more speed and taking some out of HP. Moveset, pretty straightforward. You always want Psychic and Moonblast on Lele. I thought Dazzling Gleam was nice just because it gives me more coverage, and it also obviously hits both of your opponent's Pokemon, so can bypass things like Ally Switch, also just gives you some late game options. I opted for Shadow Ball as the fourth because I didn't really feel like any hidden power was really necessary, since, like, you know, HPS and HP Fire, typically you use that for something like Salamence or Garchomp or Kartana, and I already do enough damage with Psychic or Moonblast. So I opted for Shadow Ball because it's super effective against Aegislash and Cresselia, both are bulkier Pokemon that my team struggled against, and just having a way to hit for super effective was really nice. Shadow Ball definitely relevant in a couple of the matches we had, so I was pretty happy about the Tapu Lele set overall as well. Next Pokemon, of course, is a Zapdos. This was, I think, the spread I just found online from, I want to say it was Major Bowman's Zapdos spread on like a doubles OU team. Jake Bowman. He is a VGC player, has played in Worlds before, and I think I based it off the doubles OU team that he had, and I just kind of took the spread because I was looking for a generic Zapdos spread. So this gets a mix of everything, you know, max HP, a lot of special defense with the Psychic Seed means you're surviving most of the time, or you're surviving any special attack basically. Speed to outspeed, you know, things around that speed tier, and the rest in defense. You don't need too much special attack investment. I mean, with Zapdos, it's like if you want to go for bulk, you should probably just invest a lot in bulk, especially with a set with Roost. So I opted for Thunderbolt, Tailwind, those are pretty straightforward. And for the last two options, I went with Heat Wave and Roost. Heat Wave because it would help against steel types, especially something like Ferrothorn. You can fish for burns, and you also just have another means of offense. And I didn't have any fire type coverage or attacks on this team, so felt like it was a good move to add. Roost, just really good with Zapdos in general, especially with the Psychic Seed, because you just stay around for so long. You can really divert a lot of attention away. You know, for example, turn 1, a lot of games we'd see people maybe doubling up into Zapdos, I get the Tailwind off, and the next turn I can just heal back most of that with the Roost. So, a really good move, and Zapdos is a Pokemon where I feel like it doesn't need protecting nearly as much, because of course it's a very, very bulky Pokemon. And finally, the Landorus-T. So, Landorus-T, of course, the most common Pokemon in VGC 2018 pretty much at this point, but it fit this team, like I mentioned, really well. And I did want to go with the Choice Band variant as opposed to a Scarf or an Assault Vest, specifically because I thought Band is incredibly strong against options like Cresselia, Gothitelle, Aegislash. Because Helping Hand knockoff, so something like Politoed and Landorus, a Helping Hand knockoff with Band most of the time just knocks out all these bulky Pokemon. So, you know, normally when you stare down Politoed and Landorus with the Cresselia, you're thinking, oh, this is just like a free Icy Wind off probably, or I surely won't be knocked out. But with the pressure of Helping Hand, knockoff, and Choice Band, you're able to get a lot of knockouts by surprise. That was incredibly important against these bulkier Pokemon that typically thought they could stay around. The rest of the moveset, pretty self-explanatory. You always want Earthquake. Rock Slide, of course, just a great flinching option and means of offense. And U-Turn I thought was pretty good. I didn't really feel like I needed something like Stone Edge or Rock Tomb. Rock Tomb could have been an okay option, but I feel like the 4 moves I had just gave me the best overall coverage, especially in singles, best of 1 VGC. On Battle Spot, which was what this team was really built for. So I went with just max attack, max speed, wanted to at least speed tie any other admin Landoruses and just max attack to guarantee, you know, strength. With the Intimidate, I don't really need any defensive bulk and special defense. Like, I'm not going to be surviving Ice Beams most of the times anyway, so I didn't really feel any need to go for that. So yeah, that pretty much wraps up the Pokemon descriptions. Pretty straightforward, but hopefully that, you know, gives you some more insight as to why I chose the moves and sets that I did. So, in playing with the team, there are actually a ton of different leads that you could go with. Politoed and Ludicolo is the most obvious one because you get the rain up and you put on pressure with Ludicolo immediately. But the issue with Poliludi is that a lot of teams will have a way to counter it. One of the fun things about using a rain team is that you can often have a little bit easier of a time in team preview, especially in best of 1, because most of the times your opponent will lead something that really hard counters Poliludi, because if they don't, then they're going to be in a lot of trouble. So based on that, I'd actually play around that, but sometimes Poliludi is just like amazing against some teams, and like they can't do anything to stop it. So against like those kind of teams, I would bring it, but against teams that had, you know, something like Weather, like Tyranitar or the Mega Charizard, or even something like a Gastrodon, then you'd have to be a little bit more careful. I actually went with Lele and Zapdos, or sorry, Lele and Ludicolo, as well as Lele and Zapdos. But Lele and Ludia was kind of cool. It seems counterintuitive because you can't fake out with Ludi against non-grounded Pokemon, but you can still get fake outs off against Pokemon like Landorus, like Cresselia, and that's actually a pretty big deal. Those are pretty common Pokemon in the format. And you can also just double up with a like Psychic or Moonblast from Lele and then a Z-Vortex from the Ludicolo to get knockouts. So it seems kind of weird, but basically allows you to get a lot of positioning immediately. Like typically with Lele Ludicolo, you'll have something like Zapdos, Metagross, or Politoed in the back. So based off what your opponent leads, like if they have lead with Weather immediately, then you can just swap out, say, the Lele into Politoed immediately, get the Weather up, and then just try to go for a Z move. So this gave you more options because you would not set up the rain immediately. Similarly with Lele Zapdos, this just is another alternative where, you know, Zapdos is bulkier than Ludicolo, and you can set up Tailwind, especially because Tapu Lele puts on so much pressure offensively. You can bait attacks away from that Zapdos to really guarantee a Tailwind, and it just gets really good coverage overall. Neither of these two Pokemon have Protect, but chances are you will get an attack off with the Lele before it faints, and Zapdos should be able to get Tailwind up most of the times, unless it's getting taunted. Metagross Lele, of course, as you can see, Lele a pretty common option because of that Choice Scarf item. Like I mentioned before, really strong because of heavy offense, and you outspeed your opponent right away most of the times, unless they're running their own Scarf users or something just really speedy. And finally, Metagross Ludicolo. This kind of operates similar to the Lele Ludicolo lead, but now I have Fake Out as a more, you know, dominant option. So I can fake out things, I can fake out anything. It protects Metagross, which is really good because Metagross is a relatively frail Mega Evolution. And once again, it keeps Rain for the mid to late game. So yeah. basically, you can see all these leads in action on Road to Ranked, and if you want to see how this team operates and how I play with it, and really their strengths and weaknesses, I really recommend just watching the games, because I think that's just the easiest way to see. Overall, while this was designed to be a Rain team, like, once again, it's not as one-dimensional as you may think. You want to lead with Rain if there's no counterplay, but otherwise I normally try to save it for the end game, because having an end game Z move, a strong Z move, and Perish Song is a really, really good option. And as I write here in the next point, Perish Song is a really good win condition, and it has won me a ton of games, probably at least like a third of my games on Road to Ranked alone, because this team is so offensive, you just get quick damage off, quick knockouts, and then end the game with the Perish Song. It's also important to manage your speeds well, and by that I mean like Zapdos setting up Tailwind or making sure that you always have the speed advantage. This team is really frail, so if you lose the speed advantage, it is not going to be nearly as good, because your opponent can just get really fast attacks off. So you want to watch out for your opponent setting up a Tailwind while you can't set up a Tailwind, because then Ludicolo is still going to get outsped by most of the Pokemon really around. So you do have to watch out a lot for that. Metagross and Lele, if they're being outsped, that's really bad as well, since like I mentioned, they are pretty frail, especially defensively. So, future considerations, I've already mentioned a lot of these as I've talked about the Pokemon. Ultimately, there's honestly not very much I would change about my team specifically. The only difference I would maybe make is getting a faster Tapu Lele just to guarantee outspeeding like Mecha Gengar and Tapu Koko. Otherwise, I don't have any regrets about any of the sets that I chose. I think if you wanted to change the team, you would have to basically do something completely different and give, for example, sacrifice a Pokemon or two. I think we saw 5 of these 6 Pokemon at the Dallas Regional Championships. There was Hydreigon over one, I believe, and then 4 of the 6 actually did win the Sydney International Championships, but that team operates pretty differently, right? That was like Psychic Z Lele, Metagross with Ice Punch, Zapdos, same set, and then Landorus that was Choice Scarfed. And of course, on Yuri's team, he didn't have Politoed or Ludicolo. He had, Amoonguss and Tyranitar, which are bulkier options and also give you another win condition. But you can see how, there's a lot of natural synergy here. So overall with Politoed, these are for your considerations if you want to try out these Pokemon either on this team or just in general. Politoed, you can always build bulkier, take out special attack EVs. You can try out any, combination of Icy Wind, Ice Beam, Rain Dance. Some cool alternatives are even using a Z move on Politoed. Back in 2013 and 2012, we would see the Water Gem on Politoed, specifically on Rain teams, to get a huge Hydro Pump off. So you could do that here. And then Choice Scarf is also interesting with Ludicolo. If you want to go with full Rain mode, you could go for Choice Poly and Ludi and just really overwhelm your opponent. But then that becomes a little bit more one-dimensional, and you don't have the option to protect normally with either. Of course, though, with Ludi not running Assault Vest, you actually can protect with Ludicolo. You can choose that over Fake Out, or you can even give up one of your coverage moves. I think Fake Out's just too good on Ludi to give up, but there was a player that got top 8 at Dallas Regionals. He actually did have Protect over Fake Out with this set. Assault Vest, always an option, and you can always choose to run Scald, but with Waterium Z, I think Hydro Pump is just too important because the increased damage output is just really good. Mega Metagross, like I mentioned, I didn't feel like I needed Ice Punch or Bullet Punch because it didn't make sense with this team. Ice Punch, I didn't really need that coverage, and Bullet Punch, I have Tapu Lele, so not really that great, and I'm outspeeding most of the times anyway. You could always run Adamant with more bulk and less speed investment. That also makes sense on a team with Zapdos where you have Tailwind control, but I still really like max speed Mega Metagross. Tapu Lele, like I mentioned, it's not worth to be slower than Koko or Gengar, so I'd probably just give it, more speed. You could run some gimmicky moves, something like Taunt, that's not really gimmicky, but that does shut down Trick Room. Could run something like Ally Switch even, which could be interesting, but I did want all 4 of my offensive attacks, and I didn't feel like it was worth giving up any of those for something that would be a lot more niche. Zapdos, as I mentioned, you can run more special attack investment, even run a Modest Nature, or even Timid if you want to. Protect and HP Ice are also really great options on it, but typically you'll see Thunderbolt, Tailwind, Heat Wave Roost, and then maybe a Hidden Power, or it is going to be HP Ice most of the times, and then Protect. So those are really the best moves for Zapdos. I think it gets access to Roar as well, I believe, so you could use that if I remember correctly, but I could be wrong on that. And finally, Landorus-T, of course, like I mentioned, you could go for more bulk, but I really just felt like Band and Max Attack, Max Speed was as good as it gets for a team like this. So, yeah, overall with this team, like I mentioned, I wouldn't really actually change too much other than making Lele faster. I think to address some of the weaknesses for the team, you maybe have to give up a Pokemon or two entirely and just change it up. But ultimately, these are just some different ways to build a Pokemon if you are interested. So finally, kind of concluding with weaknesses. Obviously, when you're using a weather team, going against other weather teams can be really scary. I think Rain actually has a pretty nice matchup against, for example, Sun and Sand, if you manage it well, but a well-played weather team can really screw you over, and, Mega Tyranitar is becoming pretty common specifically to give Rain a little bit more trouble, so that can always be pretty tricky. So against those teams, you really have to manage your Ludicolo well. You have to remember that Ludicolo still can snipe things really strongly with the Waterium Z, even if Rain is not up, so you have to play carefully around that. like I mentioned, the team is really frail outside of Zapdos, and that also means that if you make poor reads, you're heavily punished. It also means like surprise Scarf users can be really bad. I think there was one game where I led Zapdos Landorus, and I just got outsped by a Scarf Milotic and pretty much lost the game instantly, especially because Landorus was so important against my opponent's team. So you have to be super careful, you have to really expect a lot of surprises, and you have to try to basically not be in a position where you have to make heavy reads. Instead, you want to basically outlead your opponent consistently and then just snowball with that, because if you're playing from behind with this team, I think it's a lot harder. There's also very little counterplay against Trick Room teams, if Trick Room specifically is set up, which is why I did have a bunch of ways to shut it down, like doubling up with Lele and Ludicolo, or Helping Hand knockoff onto Trick Room users. But Trick Room still can be a very scary archetype to go up against, because if it goes up, I don't have Protect on most of my Pokemon, so I can't really style Trick Room too well, and I'm really frail. Bulky steel types, or even grass types can be kind of annoying. I mean, Ferrothorn is definitely one of the biggest threats that I was worried about facing against, because even Heat Wave only does like, I mean, yeah, it does 75%, but it forces me to bring Zapdos, which makes my opponent's job a little bit easier in Team Preview. And Aegislash, of course, I do have a bunch of ways. You know, Helping Hand knockoff can knock it out if it actually holds an item. It's not a Z move. Helping Hand Earthquake will knock it out. Something like Helping Hand Waterium Z Hydro Pump will knock it out. But if I don't conserve my Z move well, or I don't play well with Landorus, then Aegislash can cause me a lot more issues, especially if I'm running Poly, Metagross, Zapdos, and Lele. So, have to be a little bit more careful around that. I do have a lot of means of damaging it, but it can knock me out in return. And this last 2 points kind of already stem off of what I've talked about, but yeah, not utilizing the I wrote not utilizing well strongest attacks, but yeah, like not utilizing the strongest attacks well, I really should say. I actually wrote well twice, I just realized, so ignore that. But point is, if you blow your Z move into something like a Protect or something that switches out, or when it's not boosted by Rain, you do so much less damage, and it's really important to know when to use Ludicolo Z move. Similarly with Landorus, it's often not worth trading it unless you are shutting down like the biggest threat to your opponent's team, because of course Landorus does go down pretty easily, so you really want to make sure that one, you conserve it for Intimidates, but two, you also like get big attacks off with it, because with Choice Band, it's such a good late game sweeper, so you just have to really like play well with it, because if you do, then it's like a very good option. If not, then like you'll probably trade 1-for-1, but Landorus is like too important to give up most of the times for that, unless it's like against Trick Room teams. And finally, of course, the lack of Protect on 4 Pokemon means that you just don't have as many options, and you have to switch out. Like when you switch out, it's more risky, and so you really want to avoid switching as much with this team and just be in positions where you have control, and like the only switches that you want to take are when your opponent knocks you out, and you get a free switch in to capitalize off some momentum. So yeah, that is pretty much it for this team. It is a really fun archetype. It's really fast-paced as well. As you saw, we had a ton of really fast games on Road to Rank, like episodes that like had 3 to 4 games as opposed to the regular 2 to 3. And in Best of 1, I do like it a lot. I think there are a lot of cool options. You know, Parashell and Politoed, Waterium Z on Ludi, the band knockoff on Landorus, just a couple of things that I really like on this team. The Scarf on Lele as well. But yeah, I mean, some of the staples in this team, like we saw once again, the Zapdos, Lele, Metagross, and Landorus. You know, all 4 of those Pokemon were in the champion winning team of Sydney this past weekend. So, you know, you can really build around this core and just get rid of the Rain completely and play around that. But I wanted to try out Rain just because that was my starting point, and I did like it a lot. Not sure if it's the best Rain team. I think like a Rain team with Trick Room options often are really fun as well, so I might try that sometime in the future. You know, you often see it with like Gothitelle, Mawile, Incineroar, Tapu Bulu, just some examples that you might see with Politoed. But overall, I had a lot of fun with this team, and of course, if you want to try it out, there is a Showdown export as well as a QR code linked in the description below. And if you want to see this team in action, go check out this episodes of Road to Ranked. Feel free, of course, to try out this team yourself. That's going to be it for this team breakdown, guys. Hopefully you guys enjoyed. As always, if you did, please share support by leaving a like in the video. Go check out Road to Ranked. I have, of course, returned from Sydney, so I'm uploading new episodes with that brand new double belly drum team that I've been using, and we've got some fun episodes so far, and there are bound to be more fun ones coming up. So, yeah. Thank you guys, as always, for watching. Leave a like if you enjoyed, and I'll catch you guys next time. Alright, peace.